Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of The Breakdown. Today, we're breaking down some of our favorite TV shows. But these TV shows might be a little bit problematic if you look at them from the lens of 2025. But without further ado, and I don't want to spoil anything for you, let's introduce our guest for this episode. Joining us first is...
Hi, I'm Kiran. Hi, Sophia.
Hi, Kiran. It's amazing to have you again. And another regular on the show.
Hi, Sophia.
Hi, Sharmeen. So both Kiran and Sharmeen are our resident avid TV show watchers. So best believe you're in expert hands. Starting off with a fan favorite.
Slightly doubting that.
Yeah, I don't know if an expert, but I'll take it.
Starting off with a fan favorite, Friends. So I don't think Friends needs an introduction, but it's 6 white people in New York and it's a journey of friendship, relationships, tackling growing up and
life.
And life.
And life in general.
But in doing so, they seem to come across some problematic themes. So why don't we start with the first thing our producer laid out for us, which is the fat Monica jokes.
Oh yeah,
God. That was so annoying.
I've rewatched Friends a lot.
Same.
More than 5 times. I'll shamefully
And
admit.
every time they do it, I just like fast forward it and skip.
That from the beginning. Now I'd seen Friends on and off when it was like airing on like TV when it would, and then obviously when it came on Netflix. And I always remember that I would never laugh at those.
Yeah,
I would always
same.
find it very uncomfortable.
Honestly.
So, like that was also something I would just casually delete from my memory because I do love Friends. There were moments where it was like, what did I just watch? But then I'm like,
Yeah.
everything else was hilarious. Like Pivot, oh my god, I
that
can never get over
amazing. I
Like-
don't think we can pivot anymore.
that. Yeah, no, legit. But yeah,
And I think that that brings us to the idea that can you pivot your attention from such problematic themes to the overall extremely funny nature of the show?
yeah.
Because I think the writers overdid it by the end of it. The constant flashbacks, the constant jokes. The joke got tired.
It did.
Yeah.
It definitely did.
And I don't think that was due to lack of creativity. I'm sure there was an audience for it at the time. But increasingly in this day and age, I don't think that exists anymore.
That's also the fact that what are you the kind of message you're trying to tell. I know it's a comedy show and there's no messaging of any sort that is supposed to come out of it, but at the same time it's something that people are watching. I don't know how people used to watch weekly episodes, but now people binge watch it. What kind of even subliminally you're repeating one thing again and over again. So for someone who is not as someone who's young, who's impressionable, what kind of message are you telling them that this stuff is okay?
I'd like to add to that is that I get that, you know, how comedians say, oh, but comedy is supposed to be apolitical, right? I'm just making fun of it.
No.
Sure, I get why you would say that, and perhaps that's what they would have said. That's how they would defend it now, like the writers and so on.
But
it's
comedy is not apolitical anymore.
No, it's not.
Most of your the best comedians right now,
they're the smart one. Like when they're smart is when it's more entertaining.
intellectual, and they're more political. They have
But the
opinions.
thing that I'd argue is that do we have anything that's just mindlessly funny now?
But you kind of
also?
have to appeal to the lowest common denominator, especially if you're appealing to a white American audience who has very little exposure to the rest of the world, which is what they're creating for and created for, especially when they didn't have streaming services that had such wide
Forget that.
reach.
The internet wasn't what it was, like how it is now. At that time, they were still joking about dial-up internets and stuff. So,
Definitely.
I mean, I don't know. It's like, as an avid watcher, it's like, I want mindless content. Like, I would put Friends on in the background, and sure, sometimes I'd catch onto a funny joke, and that's about it. But, like, it's a
I
weird line.
Yeah,
I
I'd
guess.
watch it on shorts, YouTube shorts.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And I think another thing is that due to the rise in globalization, New York has become one of the most multicultural cities. It's a melting pot for people from all races and all ethnicities. And it was during the time that Friends was filmed as well.
Yeah.
However, and this was a decision made by the producers and the creators of this show to cast 6 white people as the consistent leads for the show, which I found was a very interesting creative decision.
Yeah.
Given the profound nature of New York's multicultural identity. So what do you guys think about that?
I'll be honest, I did not know it was a deliberate creative decision that they made to cast white people. I just figured that, I don't know, they didn't think much about
they
diversity.
Didn't think much about
That
diversity
said,
at
now
all.
with that information in mind, that disappoints me because, like, for instance, Ross and Chandler are supposed to be best friends from like uni. So you telling me that you only made like only white friends out of university? You know what I mean? It comes off weird now. See, I guess context is everything.
I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that when casting and writing 6 characters, they chose not to bring in multiculturalism. They chose not to bring ethnodiversity. Not that it didn't exist at the time in New York, just because they felt that that was what was going to be received the best.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, it was received exceptionally
10
well.
seasons.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that if there was an ethnically diverse cast, it would not have been received as well.
Yeah,
Especially to a global audience.
I agree. And Friends is famous for being like having a global audience. Wouldn't you say? Like, did you ever watch the Friends reunion?
I did.
Did you see how many people
in.
from every country? They had people from every country saying what Friends meant to them.
Of
Yeah.
course.
So I would argue that I know that people be like, oh, it'd be woke and this, that, the other. I disagree. I feel like you could have a sitcom about just friends who are multicultural and from different backgrounds and just being friends.
And I
And
think
like
that you
it's
don't have
also whenever these shows, our favorite shows from the 90s and the 2000s, brought in that diversity, it was like always sort of brought as a comic relief. Like remember
Yeah.
Ranjit from How I Met Your Mother?
Yeah,
Yes.
and then Ross's girlfriend as well.
yeah.
Do you remember? She was there. She was a great character.
She was an awesome character,
but
but
I
like
don't even
they
remember how that played out,
screwed that. I think she was
got
dating.
back together with
Yeah.
Rachel.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Okay, moving on.
That
There's
is-
a very important debate within the Friends community. Were we on a break? Weren't we on a break? This is the
Don't even,
breakdown.
like,
So how
don't
can we
even
not?
get me started
They were
on
on a break.
Okay,
but
I
the point-
rewatched it enough. They were on a
no,
break.
okay,
don't
guys,
care
just-
at this point the amount of dislike I had for that entire relationship. At this point,
That's
if
fair.
Rachel had gotten, like, if Gunther had gotten a sort of a makeover, and Rachel would have gotten with Gunther, I would have accepted that. She should not have gotten off the plane. She should have gone to Paris, raised her daughter by herself in Paris, or married someone who was like
100% there.
Yeah, I
So
get
coming back
yes.
to the crux of this episode, whether this would be plausible in the 21st century, in 2025, yes, we can debate the break forever and ever, but why would that entire conversation make this show irrelevant or slightly less relevant in this century? What was wrong with that?
I would say for me, don't get me wrong. I agree with you in the sense that I feel like she made the wrong decision. In 2025, she probably would have just said, okay, we're done now and we're going to go and I'm going to go to Paris with my daughter. And that would have worked.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have worked at that time. But it's like, as much as it tugged at my heartstrings, I was happy. Full circle moment, I also was like, eh. Like, I mean,
Didn't really care about it by the end of season 10.
I think it would make it a little bit irrelevant because to me personally, I thought people with was there a break or not a break took it a bit too far. I didn't think it was that big a deal. Friends, I personally preferred Chandler and Monica's relationship
that's my
anyway.
favorite. Like Chandler and Monica, Phoebe and Mike,
Yeah, Phoebe and
even
Mike.
Joey and Rachel.
Can we please give
Phoebe
Phoebe,
and Mike
some their
yes,
moment in
some
the sun, please?
recognition,
Because
yes.
wow, honestly, that was the best one.
The cutest relationship that I'd
Facts.
seen on TV.
Facts.
Also, should I tell you something controversial?
Sure.
I didn't mind Rachel and Joey.
Oh no!
I did not, because
That
the
made me
amount of
feel-
dislike I had. Look at
I know
Aisha
the younger Gen Z
yes,
producers are
the
nodding their heads.
amount-
It made me so
the
uncomfortable.
amount of dislike I had for that entire Ross and Rachel we were on the break thing, I was totally supporting Joey and Rachel because
But
of
they were
for-
cute. I won't. lie.
Okay,
He
they
was
were cute.
He was so sweet.
Joey was supportive.
So
like
supportive.
when he was Ross. Okay, when Rachel was pregnant, right? And she was expecting, she was living with Joey, and it was fine. He was being so supportive, but Ross made it all about himself,
That's
like
true.
my baby, my
it's that
responsibility.
nice guy
I
trope,
missed
right?
it, but it's not about you.
Yeah, it's that nice guy trope, though.
Yeah, nice guy trope, which is so overrated.
Sorry
by
to
the way. Like,
interject. We can talk about this for hours and
Yeah.
hours, but
I can go off.
the last controversial, or should I say hot take that people have that makes Friends irrelevant in this day and age is the entire storyline of Chandler's father. From the transphobia that surrounded that entire dynamic to the punchlines around gender identity. I think that's something that we can definitely touch on.
100%.
And like how him coming from such a broken family and how it affected him in the long run was just like sort of brushed over. Yes, it's a deep issue, but it shouldn't be like something that's taken lightly.
Yeah, I feel like as many comedic moments as there were from it, they could have definitely elaborated on it and made it worthwhile. Because it didn't,
Yeah.
it came off like digs.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Definitely.
In a way, they could have made it, they could have used it in their favor and also not have antagonized so many communities by just altering and actually giving it some weight, because they covered a lot of heavy stuff in Friends
They
in a different, in a way that it was comedic, but they still covered
You just don't think
topics
that
of
it was
life.
necessarily done well.
It wasn't.
So moving on to our second show of discussion is How I Met Your Mother. Now, How I Met Your Mother has been a fan favorite show for since its inception, basically. From notable characters like Barney Stinson to Ted Mosby, there were tropes developed around these characters that are still very true today. But again, a lot of people think that in 2025, this show should not be rebooted and it wouldn't
was.
survive
How I Met Your Father?
But it was rebooted in a very different
It
light.
was, yeah.
But this show, in its essence itself, would not have survived the 2025 critics.
Again, Ted Mosby was so problematic.
Same. The nice guy trope. Yeah, exactly as you said.
But what about Barney Stinson? I feel like he was extremely more problematic than Ted Mosby could have ever been.
He was.
But I don't know. I feel like for me, Barney, it's like I always knew he was problematic from the beginning. It was not a surprise.
Ted
Not that
was
I'm
masked.
Yeah.
Ted was a lot of masked, nice guys, still extremely problematic.
And the thing with me is that Barney Stinson's type of character is still very relevant today. To say that there's not people like
but
that.
so is Ted's, honestly. I think that
Yeah.
these types of people exist, but the romanticization of their characters is where I drew fault. In the way
Did
the
they
show,
romanticize Barney?
I definitely think
You
that
feel
his
that? Okay, I
entire,
didn't.
I felt
Perhaps
that his
that didn't come
entire
from me.
relationship with Robin, his transformation, the change, the character traits,
The I can fix him thing.
the I can fix him, also like the rich, funny, sort of charismatic character that was romanticized from an extremely problematic character
that's
was
fair.
I take extreme fault with that. Also, the general manipulation and the lies and the
fair.
objectification of women was romanticized. You could see women falling at Barney's feet.
Yeah.
And I think that in its essence is romanticization of extremely problematic
That's fair.
character
That's
values. And again, another problem I take with How I Met Your Mother is the incessant slut shaming in the show.
Yes.
When it comes to Barney, everyone seems to exempt him of any wrongdoing ever. But when it comes to Lily and Robin and their relationships, they come under harsh amounts of criticism. What do you guys think?
Again, Robin was, in my opinion, the most interesting character because she had her own
she was.
ambitions. And they would just, like, you can censor me out. They used to on her at every turn. Any
Absolutely.
independent thought she had, they made so much fun of the fact that apparently because she's a tomboy, that's why she's independent, which I thought was really weird. I was like, no scene.
That also brings me to the crazy hot scale that was developed and made seem like scientific measure of some sense.
What was it, the bro code thing also?
The bro book.
The bro book.
The
whatever
bro
it was.
code book.
Yeah, whatever that was. They definitely had some weird stuff in there, which I was like,
Unlike Friends, which was an extremely like family-friendly almost show, this show was meant for a more mature audience, and you could argue that people have the critical understanding to see that Barney and Ted and all of these characters are supposed to be satirical and are supposed to be a commentary on society. So should you be able to produce shows that require a little more thinking? Because if you were to see through these characters, you would understand that they weren't developed to be taken at face value. They were developed to be a criticism of society. So I think that if that is done in an intelligent way and marketed to a significantly small portion of the population, but in an intelligent way, I don't think the show would be that problematic.
I agree.
Because it talks a lot about systemic issues in society in a
And
way
how
that
Absolutely.
and how we
surface
conduct
level.
relationships as well,
Definitely.
right? Like but
And-
one thing I would like to point out, I was very young when How I Met Your Mother was airing. I mean, not old enough to recognize marketing and this, that, the other. I didn't watch How I Met Your Mother until a lot later when it was on Netflix. The one thing that I do want to say is that I read an article about how Hollywood is essentially killing itself with this like form called new literalism, where it's like everything is exposition and in front of you. There's no room for leaving that sort of
But
figuring out for
that
yourself.
is a decline of society, in my opinion, because why does everything need to be presented to you in a
why can I
way
not have
that is so
critical thought?
palatable,
Yeah.
in a way that's critical thought, a way that encourages debate and discussion? And I think that there's a fine line in when you can do that and when you can't do that. And I think one line that they crossed multiple times was cultural insensitivity.
Absolutely.
Because topics like yellowface and topics like slapsgiving, etc., mockeries made out of cultural insensitivities is something that I don't believe has room for critical thought to be able to judge that. I think leave cultures that have been historically discriminated against alone and continue with your satirical characters
Yeah, you
that
could
require
still
a
have
little
a funny
bit.
show. You could still definitely have a funny
You can
show.
create a funny show without being racist and problematic. So if you were to adapt Friends or How I Met Your Mother for the 21st century, I think that one thing I would do was take out all the cultural insensitivity, but keep the satiricism, keep a little bit of the tropes that are there, just because, yes, they add to the comedic value, but they also encourage critical thought and discussion.
And Friends will come down from season 10 seasons to like 5 seasons.
I disagree. I think that aside from casting like diverse actors, the writer's room has to be reflective of the times as well, right?
Absolutely.
I feel like even if, let's say we can't get rid of cultural insensitivity, let's say, but it's a black actor who is mocking something that is an issue within the black community, I still think that can be funny. I feel like the reason how cultural sensitivity is insensitive is the way you present it. How if you have a writer who's shared that experience, they'll have the critical insight to actually reveal what's funny and if there's an issue. That's where I would be like, because people are like, oh, you could never adapt Friends because it'll be too woke and I don't want to watch that. I do want to watch that. That's funny.
Yeah.
That would be funny.
So all in all, on a final note, what I would like to wrap up our discussion with is that, yes, reboot, redo,
Make something new though.
Yeah,
If I'm
make
being
something
honest,
new.
make something
new from
honestly,
scratch.
yeah.
because
Scrap that, make something
Like
new.
you can use the same format of like 6 friends, but be realistic about
just
it.
don't
Like
make it a
6 friends, there's add an Indian guy in there
And if any
or
of
Pakistani.
No, I forget. I mean, there was also a Pakistani joke in there once. I remember, but I can't remember exactly the episode. But my point is that you can't ever get what you got with Friends, and you
Yeah.
shouldn't want to get it again. Do something new. There's so many great
Exactly.
TV shows out there. Brooklyn Nine-Nine was entirely new. They had a diverse cast and it was funny. So I think the thing
Yeah.
is reboot or not reboot. Don't new stuff. We want new stuff.
Absolutely.
we want new stuff, we want diversity in thought, diversity in exposition, we want new concepts with new actors, with diverse casts, and I feel like there is a great audience for that. You have 3 people sitting right in front of you from halfway across the world telling you that we'll watch it. And if
We
we'll
would.
watch it, trust us, there's a lot of people who look like us, think like us, and talk like us who would watch it as well. So with that, we're going to wrap this episode of The Breakdown. Stay tuned to
Bye.
City FM 89. Like, subscribe, comment, and share your thoughts below on whether you would watch, not watch, or want something completely different.
Bye.